I'm Marcus Capone. I spent 13 years in the SEAL teams. I was the first class to graduate BUDS or SEAL training after the towers came down in 9/11. We were going to war. There's some times where you have no time to think. You're engaged, you're running, you're climbing, you're shooting, you're throwing grenades, you're dragging your buddy around. I don't think you think about down the road, what that potentially can do to you. I've been to too many memorials and funerals of friends and colleagues, associates, whatever you want to call them, teammates. Yeah, you become numb. In 2017, I hit a breaking point. Time was running out. I didn't have much time left. I had thought about suicide at that time because it seemed like I wasn't getting along with my wife, wasn't getting along with my kids, and I didn't see any hope. And thank goodness, behind the scenes, Amber found a doctor.
I heard about this treatment from a dear friend of ours. I knew that it worked for someone that we loved and respected, and he felt like Marcus would benefit from it as well.
When I first was told about doing psychedelic-assisted therapy, I didn't even know what that meant. And I remember saying, when I was walking out the door, I remember saying, don't think I'm going to come back after this weekend like a new person, because that's crazy. And man, was I wrong.
Marcus Capone, a veteran Navy SEAL who, following 13 years of active combat duty, returned home to face his own battle with mental health. He spent years undergoing treatments, but nothing seemed to work until he turned to PAT, Psychedelic-Assisted Therapy. On this episode, Marcus discusses his personal success with PAT, which led him to launch VETS, Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions, and Terra Mind, to expand safe and affordable access to PAT for all Americans. Join us as we get rebelliously curious. Marcus, thank you for joining me on Rebelliously Curious today. The psychedelic side of treatment, and also just in general, I find psychedelics very interesting. I know a lot of people are probably laughing while I say that, but the counterculture around it, the war on drugs, where we are today, with bills being passed, potentially looking at psychedelic treatment, I think it's all very wonderful. And I thank you for being on the show, and also thank you for your service as well. So yes, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chrissy. This is great. Excited to be here and excited to dive in to whatever you want to talk about. So let's do this.
That sounds good. Can we just start off letting the audience know what is Terra Mind, and then also VETS? I believe VETS stands for Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions. So can we break down what Terra Minds consists of, and then also VETS, please?
Yeah, let's start at VETS, because really Terra Mind was birthed from the success and everything we did at VETS. And when I got into this space, I didn't know anything. Maybe like many of us, aside from a lot of the academics that have been studying this for years. But if you want, so in 2017, I kind of hit a breaking point. I had at that time, I'd been on antidepressants from 2010 to 2017, so for 7 years straight, and a host of them. So, antidepressants work for some part of the population. They don't work for almost half the population. And, I was one of those individuals. They call me treatment resistant. And that's, we're talking about millions of people across the US that are treatment resistant. And so I went through, while on active duty, 2010 to 2017, multiple antidepressants, mood stabilizers, alternative therapies such as hyperbaric oxygen, TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, brain centers. I went through 5 different brain centers because, although, many soldiers are coming back with PTSD, depression, anxiety, individuals in the special operations community wanted to go overseas and wanted to deploy. And so, I was fighting the stigma of PTSD. And I think what we're finding out, many special operations veterans and other veterans are experiencing mild traumatic brain injury that are causing a lot of these different same symptoms as PTSD. So, MTBI is causing depression, it's causing anxiety, it's causing you to isolate, it's causing you to be angry. And so I was going through a lot of these different things, these comorbid diagnoses. And it's very difficult for a traditional Western trained doctor to prescribe or to treat individuals like myself, and who are treatment resistant. And so it got very frustrating, that every time you do a treatment and it doesn't get better, you kind of lose hope. And so 7 years of quote unquote treatments, you really like lose faith in the system. You feel like the system's broken or it's failed you, and you don't know where to turn. And luckily for me, I have a very strong wife, Amber, and she had been working in the background with a doctor, and the doctor had kind of been seeing all this kind of transpire over the years. He said, I had a friend who went outside the country to do psychedelic medicine, and it radically changed his life. I mean, this was an individual who had written, a suicide note and another former SEAL. And he just said, I think Marcus would benefit. And so when they brought it to me, probably like you the first time, maybe, I thought this was completely nuts. I grew up in New York going to all boys Catholic high school. And, the biggest thing I did was like drink beer. And, for me, drugs were, I didn't understand that. Right. And so when I was told psychedelics are going to help cure me or help my mental health, I didn't understand that initially until I had to do research. And I started reading a lot. And the more I read, the more it made sense that, thousands of papers have been published since the 40s and 50s on these medicines. And I call them medicines because they were intended. They were medicines that were taken and they were definitely, abused in the 60s as recreational drugs, but they were still medicines, right? And we forgot about that. And so the government shut down, all research, made everything Schedule 1, meaning that there's no medical benefit. They're highly, they have a high rate of addiction or abuse. And so from 1970 up until, let's say, 1990, we lost so many years of research, and we're just getting it back now. And so just to go back, I did enough of my own research, and I decided to kind of take a leap of faith. I tried to think everything else up to that point. So I went outside the country to a vetted ibogaine retreat that had been operating for many years, very successfully. And, all I can say is a week there radically changed my life. It shifted my perspective. I felt like I got my brain back. Some people don't understand it. They will once there's some results coming out from a study that our nonprofit did with Stanford. But these psychedelics are not just healing our brains, but they're just providing insight, and they're getting to the root cause of issues. And so my ibogaine experience was very tough. It is not a fun drug to be on. You're hooked up to heart monitors, and you have to go through a series of testing and check your heart, make sure your heart's working correctly, and there's nothing wrong with it. So you can screen out. So it's like a very clinically guided medical experience. But you are going on a trip and you are going on a journey, but it's a lot different. And this ibogaine experience was much different from anything I've heard about with some of the other tryptamines, LSD and psilocybin and et cetera. But this
Can
was
we
like
actually break down that process? Sorry, I'm so curious with that, because I think a lot of people who are like, what does this feel like? What am I expecting when I get into this? And I know you're not a doctor, right? But from your own personal experience, can you break down, like, maybe not a step by step, but like what those consistent kind of days were, that you would go in one day, you would go in, maybe once a month, and then what those feelings were like as you were going through, and then also how your mind was changing over that course of time? Because I imagine it doesn't just take one session. Well, maybe it can, but it might take more. Because I'm really curious, because I think people want to know that experience, and understand, and maybe hopefully have some empathy and relate to what that means, especially people that are dealing with major levels of CPSD and PTSD.
These psychedelic experiences are not recreational and they're not fun. You hear a lot about microdosing. There's not a ton of research on it, but people are definitely feeling better. They're getting rid of their antidepressants, and so I'm not gonna say that that's bad. I don't know a whole lot about it, and of course it's illegal because they're all still Schedule 1, at least here in the U.S. So my experience at this ibogaine retreat was just it was astounding. They make it very much like a holistic, like, health and wellness retreat. So breath work and meditation and massages and like fresh food cooked at every meal and IV drips, and like you really get prepared. So kind of, and then a digital detox. So shut your phone down and just like try to heal. Try to be present and try to heal. And so you kind of go down on a Monday, you do intake, you do blood work, you do urinalysis. You can't have anything in your system. Like, it's done very professionally. And I think, as we move forward, the way that this is going to get accepted, Chrissy, definitely in the U.S. healthcare system, and for lawmakers to be on board, is this has to be clinically guided and medically, medical access. I think we have to crawl, walk, run. And I know a lot of people are screaming about decrim and legalization, but like, we can't just go from 0 to 100 miles an hour overnight. Like, people have to understand these are still like, these are still dangerous medicines that we have to like be careful. And we also, we have to know where we're getting these medicines from, right? Like, we can't have people making these things in their basement or their backyard. We got to make sure they're being manufactured at, the correct facilities. And anyway, so this was like a very like clinical experience. Yeah, it was a very clinical experience with a little bit of like ceremony involved, like fire ceremony, setting intentions, writing down on a piece of paper what you want to get out of the experience, just like you would do with a therapist or a coach. And then, you kind of look at that stuff, you go in there with, I want to stop drinking, or I want to stop doing opioids. I want to be a better father. I want to be a better friend. I'm a terrible son, whatever it is. I mean, everybody's got, I want to heal from this incident that happened 20 years ago. I watched my friend get killed. I just want to get over it. So like, you go in and you write all these things down, trying to figure out what you want to accomplish, right? And you like write it on paper, because when you get your ideas on paper, it gets out of your head. You kind of crumple the paper up and you throw it in the fire right before you go in. And so it's like, hey, I'm cleaning myself of all these things, and then I'm going to go under and go for this gnarly 12-hour journey. And so you do that. So it's like a little bit of ceremony, and then but then you get hooked up and you get IVs, and you're ready, and you're about to, blast off into another world. And then about, you take medicine, it's all on body weight, and it's like measured out. And ibogaine, if anybody doesn't know, just real quick, there's a few different places it comes from. Primarily, what people understand it comes from Western Africa, and countries like Gabon, I think maybe Cameroon, but the plant grows for 5 to 7 years, so it takes a while. And then they extract the ibogaine, which is the most prevalent alkaloid that's in this iboga plant. It's got a bunch of them, and ibogaine is the one that kind of does the work. I think the others also do some of the work, but we need to do more research, Chrissy. So I can't really answer that. And so you take this, this medicine. It's a few different, a few pills, and within 2 hours, you hear some buzzing around your ears, and your body starts to feel a little bit relaxed. And next thing you know, it almost feels like you're sinking into the bed. You put some eye shades on, and there's music, and the music is powerful because in depending on where you go, in ceremony, they play a little bit of the Gabonese music, which is Bwiti music. And it's not like music that we know, with like very rhythmic, and you can kind of go like this, with like our music. It's all over the place. So it's kind of like bing and bong, and it's not very rhythmic, but the idea is that like it kind of jacks you up. Like it brings you out of your comfort zone. So as you're going into this really deep psychedelic, ibogaine is actually called a neurogen, which is like a awakened dreamlike state. That's what you go into. So as you go into this journey, if you pulled your mask off, it wouldn't be like what we're hearing about with like psilocybin and LSD, where the wall may be melting or things may be looking weird. You're almost come out of it, and you're obviously still heavy on the drug, and you can't move. Your body becomes a toxic, so you have to have nurses kind of help you to go to the restroom, or if you need to purge or puke. They help you with that. You can't do it on your own. You're really just lying in bed. So you put the mask back on, and you literally are in like a movie scene. And so everybody's different. You can be first person, third person. Some people are like kind of like up above watching journey of their life. Some people are reliving it again. Some people are reliving the other person if they've had a trauma with another individual. Like it can go any which way. So it's not like the journey is exactly the same for everybody, because it's our minds, right? My mind is different from your mind, is different from my children's mind. And so everybody's journey is going to be different. And so mine initially was just it was deep and dark. And I tell people, it was kind of violent. And it was probably from, serving, and we didn't even get into that. I served 13 years on active duty. I was in the SEAL teams. And so, we deployed a lot, pretty consistently since 9/11. And so, a lot of my first experiences, my first ibogaine journey was like, it was gnarly. It was, I tell people, it was almost like getting hit by a Mack truck, like just over and over again for 12 hours. But what it did is it kind of passed, it did a whole, just experience of my life, almost from when I was born to where I was at, at that moment in that bed. Everything from stuff that happened during childhood with, my dad or my parents, kind of getting into school at a younger age. My parents put me ahead. And so like, I was like tall and skinny and kind of goofy. And so, kind of picked on and beat on. And then, through teenage years into college, and I played ball in college, and all of a sudden I like grew muscles and got bigger. And then like I took all that energy out on other people. And so, I just kind of felt like I grew into this like violent life. And then of course, after college, I went into the military. And so I just had experiences of just everything there from, birth to that day. And I saw friends that I lost in the wars. And I, had experiences of things that I thought I could have done better, and, moral injury, what if, and then you're just getting rocked, and you're learning lessons the whole time. And, some of the therapists joke that ibogaine has a sense of humor, because it really teaches you. So sometimes you're looking at an experience, say, like, let's say a traumatic experience. I don't know, it could be anything. It could be sexual trauma, and you're like reliving that experience again. And you're like, why am I seeing this right now? Why is this drug showing me this? And then all of a sudden, if you can't get it, which your mind again is tricking you, it'll show it in a way that it might be a joke. Like it literally will be like a joke, but you get it. You're like, oh, I get what they're trying to, I get the message here. I understand what they're trying to show me. And I've actually laughed out loud. I'm like, oh, okay, you got me. Like, I get it. I understand what you're trying to show me. Like, this is judgment. Like, I'm a judgy person, and it might be a funny scene that they're showing me how I'm judging. Right. And so it's just a wild experience. But here's the thing, the stuff I'm telling you, we're facing these experiences that have been holding us back, has been making us angry, has been making us sad, has been making us standoffish with our children or with our friends, or not want to answer individuals back, or lie in bed, or whatever that is, right? Whatever the trauma is with that experience. Traditional approaches, the antidepressants and some other things, they put band-aids on those symptoms, right? They don't really get to root cause. Therapy tries to get to root cause, but therapy can take a really long time. If you've ever been in therapy, Chrissy, you talk to a therapist, you got to trust that person. And like when you're trying to open up like your deepest literally your deepest secrets, yeah, do you really want people to know that sometimes? So, but here's the thing. The only way you get better is to open up those deepest, darkest secrets. There's no doubt. Like, you cannot get past stuff. In your psychedelic experiences, you have no choice, right? Like, you're doing therapy with yourself, and you're seeing it, because we all can heal. We all have it inside. the psychedelic
Well,
brings
it's
it out.
mind-body connection too.
It
You know, I think there's a
is.
big, obviously, yeah, a big part to that is when you're undergoing a form of treatment and along with therapy, you know, along with then there could be a combination of things that people need to do to be able to heal themselves. But I think perception and the perspective that you have on yourself and others and self-awareness for sure is a big part of that. We all can be more self-aware. You know, every single day we can be. And I believe that I think, you know, I would hope and imagine within clinical settings, you know, those are the goals is to open up self-awareness for self to understand emotions and where those things are coming through in process. It's challenging. I read though some statistics here. It was saying here, Alan Davis is the Ohio director of the Center for Psychedelic Drug Research and was talking about clinical settings and outcomes. And he says from 2017, 2019, we conducted the first randomized control of psilocybin therapy with people with major depression disorder. And then what he discovered was that 54% of the people after the treatment was fully completed when they went in complete remission from depression and was extremely successful. Do you know any other stats outside of like working with Terra Mind in your company that you've seen that's helped vets too, or just other people in general? Have you
Yeah.
seen what those stats are, and could you and share us and then what those maybe scientific stats are if you have
Yeah.
them?
Yeah, Chrissy, the science is, I think the science is incredible. And, there's over, I don't know if people know, there's over 200 clinical trials right now going on with everything, MDMA, psilocybin, DMT, ibogaine, what else? And then all the other novel and derivatives of all off of those. So in 5 years, like you and I, we're probably not going to talk about LSD and psilocybin anymore. We're going to talk about like Comp 001 or DM 552. These are going to be like
It's
shorter
awesome.
duration.
Yeah.
Yeah, there could be, and that's what's happening, right? Like because some of these last a long time. Like ibogaine lasts a very long time. I do think it's one of the most healing molecules that are out there, and I'm very excited to see where it's going to go, especially for brain health. But yeah, so you mentioned Dr. Alan Davis. We actually work with Dr. Alan Davis at Vets. He's doing a study right now, a data collection study. He's incredible. I just saw him at the Psychedelic Science conference in Denver, and he's at the forefront of all this. He was at Hopkins for a long time, and now he's working at Ohio State. But there's MDMA finished its phase 3 clinical trials recently, and their second phase 3 clinical trial, I think both of them were over 70% efficacy rates and up to a year in completely getting rid of any PTSD symptoms in soldiers. I mean, this is like groundbreaking,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, stuff that we need to scream from the rooftops around the globe to say, hey, there's stuff out here that really works. Like we get, going to see a therapist on a regular basis, but you've been doing that. I have friends have been doing that for 18 years, Chrissy, and not breaking through. All these drugs are doing is they're a tool to help you break through to where you're trying to go. Like I was saying with the, with the ibogaine journey. And so just to step back, I'll get into some of the data. So after my experience, I got a little bit deep into it, but I wanted to kind of let people know what these experiences are like, because you are getting to the root cause of the issue. I came out, Amber flew in, like we embraced, like we cried. It was just like incredible. Like this was, and I just said, like, this is it. Like, this is exactly what we need. I can't even believe we've been toying around with all these other things that really aren't working. Like nobody takes antidepressants and goes, my life was changed. I'm so aware now. Like I want to help people. Like I don't know anybody who's done that. Right. And so psychedelics do that. And I turned to her and I just said, like, we have to figure this out. Like, this is the answer. And we didn't know what we were doing. I'm not a doctor. And so what we did is what someone did for me. Someone paid for my whatever $5,000 treatment, right? These are
Wow.
not cheap. No, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, when you're talking about healing forever, it's really cheap. But when you're talking about someone who makes $65,000 a year and could barely afford $1,000 emergency bill, these are expensive. And so, Terra Mind is going to solve the affordability problem, but that we'll get into that. But that's a big issue. So and here's the thing, I couldn't go down there because I couldn't pay for it at the time. So some other nonprofit paid for me. And so we just said, okay, we're going to have to figure out a way to pay for this. And so her and I just started, kind of things just start happening when you become more aware, right? I don't know if we call it intuition or the universe or whatever you want to, however, whatever you believe, those things start happening. You start noticing it. So of course, that week, I have a friend's mother. The friend reached out and goes, "Hey, my mom would like to write a $25,000 check to an organization that's supporting veteran healthcare." And I'm like, I got an idea for that. I swear this is how this stuff happens. And I called her up and I said, "I know you think this is crazy. I promise there's research out there, but let me just tell you my story." She's like, "I love it. I just want to know where this is going because I wanted to help people. I don't want it to get lost in the system at some big nonprofit that I don't even know what they're doing." I'm like, "Well, your money, I promise, is going to save people." And we took that $25,000 and we were able to treat fund, because we can't treat, fund like 5 other individuals whose stories are the same exact as mine, Chrissy. Right?
Wow.
I'm like, this is not subjective. This was not a placebo. There's something here. And then they told their friends, and then they contacted us and we were, shit, we don't have any money. Well, what do we do? Well, I think we have to start a nonprofit because we have to raise money and do this because it's still legal in the US. And how do we get around that? And so, you hire attorneys and you put all this stuff together. So fast forward, we've raised now, in 2019 VETS, this is VETS, Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions, my wife and I founded. We have raised over $12 million and we're closing in on almost 1,000 special operations veterans treated at roughly $6,000 per individual,
Wow.
This have different prices. And we wrap around all the programs, Chrissy. So all the prep and integration from the therapists and the psychedelic integration coaches, the clinically guided treatments, the monitoring, and then we give them community support. We have weekly integration calls, spousal integration calls, individual integration. We do multiple meditations because some people think meditation is weird. So we do meditation, we do Kundalini yoga, we do breath work, whatever fits your boat, right? I like Kundalini yoga because it's just, I don't know, whatever.
No, I'm the same way. I love Kundalini too. I know people will laugh, but it's true.
It
I love yoga. It's what gives me mindfulness. It's the best thing. Yeah.
And so, and the person who taught me is a former SEAL who got out very, I'll call him damaged, went to the jungle, healed through months of ayahuasca and yoga. And the shaman down there just said, "Hey, when you go back to the States, here's the deal. Drugs are great when you need them for healing, but you can't do this every day. And it's just not how it works. And so you're going to have to take something." So he learned Kundalini yoga in the jungle, came back here.
Wow.
Now teaches at the Rama studio in Venice. And his name's Mikhail Vega, and he's a very close friend. But but I learned from him. And now he teaches every Sunday a class at 9 a.m. and whoever wants to jump on and do it. And so we have all these programs now. And in seeing this, and this is where I'm going, Chrissy, I'm going to get into Tara. In seeing all the success we had at VETS, so we have research going on with Alan Davis at Ohio State and Dr. Nolan Williams, who just did a groundbreaking study with Stanford, which results will be released very soon. So we're doing research, we're providing funding for individuals, and then all the advocacy work. Before we started, you were talking about Representative Crenshaw and the new
Correct.
time appropriations, amendment that bill that they're trying to get introduced in the NDAA. And so we're doing all these things a part of VETS, and it's very exciting. Well, so how VETS keeps the engine going is by donor dollars, right? We don't have a product, we're not selling a service, so we have to have very good partners, and we do. We have great companies and great individuals that understand that psychedelic therapy is going to be a one of the top tools to use for mental health in the near future. It's happening, and I think it's going to really shift, hopefully globally, soon. And so I got approached by an individual 2 years ago who saw the success we were having, and he had an affinity for veterans, and his name's Grant Verstandig. He's my business partner now, and he started donating to VETS because he just saw that veterans were getting better through what we were doing, not getting better through the traditional approaches which he knows all about because he's a genius. And he just said, hey, I want to help this cause. I want to be a part of it. Like, I see the success you're having, and this is important. And like every good entrepreneur, in a year, he came to me and said, this needs to be done for much larger population than veterans. How do you scale this for the non-veteran population, for everybody out there who's treatment resistant or suffering? And so I said, that's great. I don't know how to do that yet, but what I did say is, the one thing that we're doing here, aside from allowing people to heal, we're paying for everybody here. Like, it's subsidized, right? And so that was like kind of like a big thing. And so I got hired on to his venture firm, Red Cell Partners, that he runs. And we just started figuring out different ways where we can provide the most impact. So his thing is, how can I solve the world's biggest problems? Like, that's it. Like, that's, I love people, I love people like that. Like, we're just going to solve the biggest problems to help the most people. And so this problem we're solving is mental health. And how we're going to do that? We're going to do it with psychedelic. And how are we going to do that? Well, I don't know. Are we going to build a drug development company? Well, that's really difficult and a lot of money, and you don't even know if you're going to help people. Can we build brick and mortar, right? Can we send people outside the country to retreats like I did? We can do that, Chrissy, but again, it's expensive, very hard to like build enough of them, very hard to find vetted providers, and they're like, wrapping everything around. It's not just about the drug. It's like, it's the whole kind of
it's a community. And also we look at psilocybin, and we also look at ayahuasca and the massive boom of ayahuasca tourism that has actually probably been maybe more negative than positive, I would say, on Peru and other people. And using psychedelics, there's actually been a lot of deaths that have come out now within Peru, not using ayahuasca, saying it is and it isn't. So there are a lot of, there's a lot of, there's a lot of issues in the space that needs to be clarified. And so people are educated. And I believe that's where you guys come in, is educating people that there are better treatment and there's ways to do this that are safe and healthy and effective. And also will be legalized, hopefully, at some point in time. And the FDA will also approve these for trial testing as well.
Chrissy, it's happening really fast. I mean, it's almost happening. It's happening faster than we expected. If you would have asked me a year ago, and I think I did on an interview of, hey, what do you think about psychedelics for active duty members? I think I literally said maybe 5 to 10 years, we'll start seeing some individuals that will be allowed access to psychedelics for probably, PTSD and depression. That's happening. Like, it's already happening this year. And so, granted, nobody on active duty is having access yet, but I'm saying the conversations are happening. They're introducing new bills to appropriate money. Representative Crenshaw, again, appropriating $75 million for research for individuals that are struggling. Like, so it's out there. Like, this is all happening very fast. And so, going back to Terra Mind, there was just a lot of different ways that we were trying to figure out how to provide access to the most people, and then how to make it affordable. Like, that's it. Because we can provide the means, but if you can't pay for it, like, what do we get out of it? Right. And I do think when MDMA gets through FDA approval next year, if we don't find a way quickly to pay for it, initially what's going to happen is people are going to pay out of pocket who can afford it. But as you and I both know, the majority of the individuals that need it will not be able to afford it until it gets covered as a subsidy. And we'll get into that. And so,
do you think insurance companies will cover it at some point in time? I know there's a conversation out there about that right now.
Oh, no, they absolutely will. They introduced new CPT codes this year. Compass and MAPS partnered on the application. And yes, they will, but it's going to take some time. It's not going to happen on day one. I think
it's a lot of education.
Insurance companies won't pay for it on day one. Insurance companies, my business partner jokes, he goes, they don't like to bet with their own money. They like to bet and make sure everything else is working.
They spend everybody else's money. That's what they do.
So they'll take some time for that. And again, we have to be, we're all friends. And so I don't want to, talk bad. We need insurance. Obviously, we're all, that's how we cover, many of our healthcare needs. And so that was the idea. So really, the thesis is, how do we provide access and affordability for psychedelic therapy? And that's how Terra Mind was born. And so Terra Mind has, basically a few components. One, it's eventually it's going to be a very robust software platform. It's going to be a technology platform where we're able to kind of manage all these other moving parts, in one place and provide outcomes data and everything. So it has two components. So first, we match patients and providers, exactly what we did successfully at Vets. Vets, an individual comes to the website, they apply, they come up with a treatment plan because, technically we can't tell them where to go. Like in healthcare, you can't refer people to places, and you especially with dealing with Schedule I outside the US, I can't tell them, well, you should go do ayahuasca here, or you should do ibogaine there. But we have come to vetted retreats that individuals know about, and they come with a plan. They say, I want to go do X, Y, and Z here. And we kind of, go run them through a whole process at Vets, and we provide them a grant scholarship, and then they can go do their treatment, right? And they get hooked up with a therapist, et cetera. So similar to our mind, right? We're basically matching, patients and providers. We've done it successfully. And we vet those providers and make sure they're safe and effective. We onboard them to the Terra Mind network, and then eventually we'll help them find a trusted provider that like fits their needs through a set of questions and what they're going through. Second, so we got the provider kind of matching piece. Second, we're building a digital centers of excellence to drive like standards of care, because right now it's the Wild West. You have one doctor, and right now in the US, the only thing we can do legally is ketamine. So ketamine-assisted therapy, right. It's phenomenal for treatment-resistant depression, suicidality, over 70% response rates. It's the fastest acting antidepressant we have right now. Until these others come to market, like that's what people are doing. A lot of people just don't know it's even out there and available.
When I'm looking at big pharma, I imagine will play a part in this at some point in time. Can I get your general thoughts on what you think about pharma playing a point in, giving and distributing psychedelics to some degree? Do you think that's going to happen to the major populace when it gets into like obviously clinical, not just purchasing, but clinical, not over the counter, but being able to be prescribed? Where does big pharma play a place in this? And should we be worried about that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the things that I can't control, I'm getting better at not worrying about. Pharma,
I need to take that advice.
Yeah, if we can't control it, we can bitch and complain, and we can do all other things. But like, I mean, I understand there's ways to make change. Pharma, I'll go back to what I said before. Pharma also we need, right?
True.
We need pharma because there are, in terms of, a lot of people would be dead without a lot of the, vaccines and medications and everything else for blood pressure and just everything across the board that we need as a society. Now, on the other side of that, there's also a lot of greed and nasty shit that comes along with that, right? And so if we can sift through like good pharma and bad pharma, it's the same, right? Like everything else, there's good law enforcement officers, there's bad law enforcement officers, there's great soldiers, there's bad soldiers, there's great people in the media, there's bad people in the media, and there's so I put pharma in that way, that there's the pharma's doing great things for us, and then pharma's also like tearing us apart in other ways, right, with the opioid epidemic, and so we just have to be mindful of what they're doing. Pharma's already getting involved in psychedelics, so they're putting money towards different drug development companies and delivery systems. They're figuring out ways, and here's where pharma, they're figuring out ways to be able to better deliver the medicine, make it safer, make it maybe shorter duration if it needs to be shorter. And so they are going to play a part, Chrissy, and I think we just have to be comfortable knowing that they're here, and we should get rid of the bad actors, and we should be mindful of that and make sure we hold them accountable. And we are. I mean, at least, I think with some of these opioid settlements, it's like upwards of $50 billion. Hopefully that money, gets distributed into the right communities. And of course, you and I both know probably a bunch of that money will be wasted, and there'll be, we'll hear about this politician, that politician, getting in trouble. But also, a lot of that money will hopefully do good. And so,
And
Just
it
to
being
answer,
affordable too. I
yeah,
think that's a big thing, is having it affordability is one thing we know that big pharma is not always great about.
yeah,
But this is something, when we look at specific psychedelics that we know that are accessible through nature. I, again, don't recommend people to go out and just go and do psychedelics and that. I think you need to do your work and your research, and if you feel that it's right for you. But there are ways that things are in nature that they can go and accessible. So big pharma can't control that. So giving education for big pharma and also making it accessible and priced well would make sense for people that want to use this in proper medicinal treatments.
yeah. I agree. And so, going back to Terra Mind, again, the mission, accessibility and affordability. We're trying to, we're building this platform, we're building this centers of excellence network of providers and therapists, and the idea is that we want individuals to get better. And the only way to get better is to measure the results of those individuals. So the platform, every individual that goes through our platform, we'll be measuring them, before and after their treatment. And then we'll make sure to show these providers, like, if their treatment protocols are actually working. And again, I don't think America knows this, but maybe 10% of providers that are providing mental health services are actually measuring what they're doing at all. So we're coming in and they're going, I think this might work for you. Here you go. We're not really measuring those outcomes, right? So at Terra Mind, we're going to be very, very dialed in and focused on measuring outcomes, because if we measure outcomes on these molecules, ketamine, MDMA, psilocybin, we know the type of population for a specific drug. If that person's going to get better, then we can take that data and we can spread that data around to other providers and say, oh, hey, by the way, this group over here, this is what they're prescribing. This is how they're prescribing it to this type of population, and they've gotten better. Maybe you should try these protocols. And so that's kind of, the real North Star Terra Mind eventually is going to be this like robust.
I respect that so much, because we need that big data. We don't have a lot of it, obviously, because of the war on drugs. It was never really happened because of the early 60s, counterculture movement, which was fantastic for it. But again, we look at Nixon and a lot of other presidents that decided to fight the war on drugs, and unfortunately, yes, the war on drugs is still happening to a degree, but not in a clinical sense, is very different. And that stopped that education. So agree. I think what you're doing is looking at, if medical providers are not taking that data, or experts aren't doing it yet, and now not-for-profits are doing it, I think that's the way to go. The people, civilians, have to do it then and be able to contribute that data, or at least hopefully they recognize it, in a medical state.
They do. And there's only so far donor dollars can put towards drug development and paying for individuals to go outside the country to do psychedelics, like our our nonprofit does. But so we have this platform, we're collecting data, and the way that we're going to make it affordable is, I go back to the insurance companies. The insurance companies are not going to be able to pay for this, or they're not going to pay for this on day one. But who will pay for this and who's very innovative are self-funded employers. So employees are about 140 million Americans are covered under their employee benefits, just like dental, or now fertility, or GLP-1, like Manjaro and some of these others, right? Like, so employers are starting to pay for these, cover them as healthcare benefits. So we're going to be one of the first companies to actually take psychedelic medicines and, I want to say, force, where we're going to have contracts with employers to cover this as a healthcare benefit for their employees. So you're an employee working at, I don't know, JP Morgan. Maybe JP Morgan's not going to step up on day one, probably not. But some of our early adopters, they will cover this as a healthcare benefit. So you're an employee working at your company, you're struggling. If you fit the criteria, you may be able to access these medicines, and your employer will pay for it, right? And so that's the model here. And so we're going to do that for the first couple of years. We know these medicines work, and that's where the data comes in. And once we have that data, I can go back to the Aetnas and the Uniteds and the Blue Crosses and say, here's the data, here's what we've been doing with self-funded, self-insured, basically, companies. Now you need to cover it for your populations, right? Because a self-funded employer has, I don't know, 10,000 employees, right? So they cover their employees. But I go to a Blue or an Aetna that has 1 million, 5 million that they're covered. Now we've just reached a larger population. And so that's our model. That's what we're doing. There's a lot of work to do. I've been told that this is definitely going to be one of the hardest things that you can get done. But, I'm surrounded by an incredible team that's done this before in other areas. And so, with the success we've had prior and the work we're doing and kind of this explosion of interest in psychedelic therapy, I think we're positioned to do great things and reach the largest amount of folks and hopefully get it paid for. So
I think so too. I'm like, honestly, I don't think so. I'm optimistic that you're going to have a smoother road than you've maybe had in the past moving forward. So it might be challenging in many ways, but I think that I'm extremely optimistic on that side. So Marcus, thank you so much. And as I say to all my guests, thank you for being rebelliously curious with me today.
yeah, I love it. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Chrissy.
you.
Thanks for having me.